Hi guys and welcome back to the Mighty Blues. My name is of course Cameron and welcome back today to another live stream. It is Wednesday. I hope you all are doing well. It is of course our first live stream since we had the news last night. The unfortunate, terribly sad news that Everton chairman Bill Kenwright had passed away at the age of 78 years of age. We've continued to see an outpouring of support and condolences and thoughts from ex-players, ex-managers, people within the media, and obviously various different fans towards Bill's family and friends after what was a truly devastating day yesterday. It really did hit me, and I know I had a lot of comments on the video talking about some of the opinions I'd given on Bill Kenwright and his running of Everton Football Club over the last sort of 2 years specifically, but as I said in that video yesterday, yesterday wasn't a day to discuss Everton Football Club or the running of Everton Football Club or how well it hasn't been ran over the last sort of 20 odd years. It was a day to remember somebody who was a massive Evertonian, somebody who always had the best interests of the club in his heart, even if we didn't always agree with the decisions he was making, and somebody that unfortunately has lost their life, through a terrible, terrible disease. Somebody who was a father, who was a grandfather, who was a husband, who was a brother and uncle, and somebody that ultimately it was synonymous with the football club. Certainly the football club as I know it. I know there'll be a lot of older fans out there watching that remember a time, before Bill Kenwright and, with Everton Football Club. But, as a 25-year-old Evertonian, I don't, every memory I've got of Everton, Bill Kenwright is involved in or is certainly a part of. So, obviously just want to extend the message that we said on the video yesterday, sending all of our love and condolences to Bill's family, his friends, his wife, in what I'm sure is an incredibly difficult time for them. And yeah, it's great to see so many people pouring out with love and thoughts and condolences and really nice messages and stories. There's been a lot of stories that I've read over the last 24 hours that have made me sort of view Bill in a little bit of a different light. And obviously I think it's understandable, and I think a lot of you will understand that everything I've ever said on this channel about anyone is strictly in a footballing term and strictly relative to what their footballing job is, if you like. I've never really personally attacked anybody from a personal sense, and whenever I've spoken about the board members, Bill or whoever else it might be, I've always said I don't know them personally, however professionally X, Y and Z, but as I said yesterday, I think you'd struggle to find somebody who has met Bill Kenwright and doesn't talk highly of him and doesn't think he's a wonderful human being. And we've read a lot of stories over the last 24 hours, not just the messages and the condolences, but stories from various different charities and various different people that needed help at one point in their life, and Bill Kenwright was there to be able to offer a helping hand. And you don't really see that because it's not publicised, or it's not always in the news or in the media, but when things like this happen, unfortunately it takes something like this for those stories to be out there and for people to maybe look at things a little bit differently. I'm not saying that the football club has automatically been ran amazingly in the last few years. I'm not saying that. I'm not going back on my feelings of the running of the football club, but Bill is a person. As I said, it's not really a time to talk about the running of the football club. It's a time to ultimately mourn and send our respects and thoughts to a lifelong Blue who has lost his life, and ultimately that's what we all are, aren't we? Lifelong Blues, whether we become the chairman of the football club, whether we become a player for the football club, a manager, an owner, whether we're just a fan for our entire life. Ultimately, we're all lifelong Blues, and I think that was the most important thing to remember yesterday. Seamus Coleman has done a letter, obviously sending his thoughts. Roberto Martinez, former Everton manager, has also done a letter as well. Meg Finnegan has done a letter. Farhad Moshiri has done a letter. Sean Dyche, of course. Big Duncan Ferguson. There's been a number of memorial and condolences written over the last 24 hours regarding Bill. I think the players had a minute's silence before training today at Goodison Park to remember him as well. And yeah, look, we're not going to sit here and go through all of the letters because we'd be here all day, but they are available on Everton's website if you want to check them out, if you want to watch them. I don't see why I can't see the chat at the moment. Here you go, I can see the chat now. Not too sure why that was doing that. But yeah, you know, ultimately it was an incredibly sad day yesterday. It really, really did hit me as well, especially when I seen a couple of tweets from people and a couple of posts from people trying to point the finger and trying to point the blame at various other people for the situation. And you know, I just think it was really, really unsavoury to say anything other than respect and obviously thoughts and prayers towards Bill yesterday. Any of the sort of finger pointing and trying to play the blame game yesterday is just, it makes the situation much worse. Even though those people might be thinking that they're sticking up for Bill Kenwright, it makes the situation so much worse. And as I said, it's a time to be respectful, and it's ultimately a time to mourn and as I said, mourn somebody who was a lifelong Evertonian, regardless of what you think about him, regardless of your thoughts on his time at the football club as a chairman, as an owner, as a board member. It's about respecting him as a lifelong Evertonian and somebody that, by all accounts, and it really is all accounts, because it's not just been one or two people have come out and spoke about him. You've had countless amounts of ex-players, countless amounts of current players, from players that are still in the first team to this day to players that have only just left the club, like Alex Iwobi, players like Gerard Deulofeu, who obviously were at the club 10 years ago, all the way back to your sort of Neville Southall, Don Hutchinson, Kev Campbell, lots and lots of players from the past and the present, all saying one thing: he was a true blue and he only wanted what was best for Everton Football Club. Carlo Ancelotti has come out and said something similar, so has Roberto Martinez. So yeah, as I said, incredibly sad news, and obviously all our thoughts and prayers are with Jenny and his family and friends at this time. And yeah, it's not been a particularly great week for Everton, has it? We obviously had the Merseyside derby defeat on Saturday, and all of the sort of fallout from that. Not just being a sort of typical Merseyside derby defeat at Anfield. It was one in which I think a lot of us, myself included, felt that we were unfairly robbed in. We then obviously find out the devastating news about Bill Kenwright yesterday, and then today we've had even more sort of groundbreaking news surrounding our FFP court hearing. The Telegraph reported about an hour or so ago that the Premier League has recommended that Everton face a 12-point deduction if Everton are found guilty in its case against them for breaching profit and sustainability rules. So obviously the Premier League are not the ones that decide or determine what the punishment is for this situation. However, they have recommended that the independent committee that will be deciding what the punishment is if Everton are found guilty, and it has to be said it's a big if, because obviously at this time Everton are strictly of the opinion that they've not done anything wrong, they've followed the rules, and there'll be simply no case to answer to. But the Premier League seemingly suggesting that if Everton are to be found guilty, then a 12-point deduction would be what they recommend is given out. Now, I have many issues with this. Firstly, why are the Premier League recommending any form of punishment to the independent committee? Surely this has now got nothing to do with the Premier League. The decision that is made has nothing to do with the Premier League. The punishment that is given out has nothing to do with the Premier League. So why the Premier League are sticking their noses in and trying to trying to manipulate the situation and almost trying to sort of, as I said, interject with the independent committee is beyond me. I don't understand it. They're trying to influence a decision that ultimately, surely they should be very much a sort of what's the word, an unbiased party in. But as I've said numerous times before, I genuinely believe this league is corrupt. I genuinely believe there's agendas in this league for certain teams, for certain managers, for certain players, for certain situations. I don't think it's... I think the argument that there's nothing wrong with the Premier League other than it's just the referees are a bit shit is beyond me, because I've watched football for 25 years now, and trust me, there is much, much more wrong with this league than just a bad level of officiating. And I think a situation like this is quite telling, really, isn't it, on how the Premier League feel about Everton Football Club and why the Premier League feel in that way. Just to clarify for people that may be confused, Everton have not been given a 12-point deduction. What has happened is the Premier League have recommended that Everton are given a 12-point deduction if they are found guilty of breaching the FFP rule that they supposedly are under, well, not supposedly, that they are under investigation for. The ultimate punishment will be decided by the independent committee, and that punishment obviously hasn't been decided yet, and we've not heard the verdict from the independent committee, so Everton could be innocent in this whole situation, and this whole conversation might become irrelevant. But if we are to be found guilty, the Premier League will recommend a 12-point deduction, which is, as I said, completely laughable, considering you only get, I think, a 6-point deduction for going into administration. So the Premier League want to double that for breaching one FFP charge. Now, as I said, I've got a couple of issues with this. Firstly, the timing of this article. The Telegraph have decided to put this article out less than 24 hours after the club have lost somebody who is so synonymous with the club, a chairman, somebody so well respected, and somebody that, without a shadow in my mind, will have everybody associated with Everton Football Club now, fans, employees, players, staff, all, really, really sad and devastated about the news we heard yesterday. And then, less than 24 hours later, we get, the British media, which is a poison in itself, and I've got no issue with saying that. I've been watching a number of footballing documentaries over the last few weeks or so with my girlfriend. We've watched the Spurs one, we've watched the David Beckham one, we've watched the Wayne Rooney one, and one thing that I have concluded from all of those documentaries is that the media in this country simply is poison, and they find any opportunity when somebody is down or when somebody is in a bad moment to try and drag them down further, and that is exactly what has happened in this situation. The media know what happened with Bill Kenwright yesterday. The media know the situation that everybody associated with Everton will be in today and for the next few days and for the next few weeks in terms of a state of mourning, and yet they still have decided to publish this article with a headline that basically almost not tricks people, but it almost reads as Everton are set to be given a 12-point deduction. That's the headline I've read in a number of different articles today. Everton set to be given 12-point deduction. Well, no, we're not set to be given a 12-point deduction, firstly, because we haven't even been found guilty yet. We will have to be found guilty before anything happens, and then the punishment will have to be decided, and the Premier League have only recommended a 12-point deduction. The independent committee might turn around and go, no, it's never happened before, we've never given that big of a deduction before, it's not happening. Secondly, where does this leave Manchester City, who have had 115 breaches of FFP, or supposedly have been charged with 115 breaches of FFP? Now, obviously, there is a situation in which Everton are found guilty and Manchester City are not found guilty, in which case Manchester City will not be punished for anything. But if Everton are found guilty and given a 12-point deduction, like the Premier League are recommending, and then Manchester City are found guilty, does that mean that they then get a 1,200-point deduction because they're guilty of over 100 more offences than what Everton are? Well, no, it won't, because the Premier League haven't got the bollocks to do that. And the Premier League haven't got the ability to do that. So, why is it one rule for one and one rule for another? I simply just don't understand it. And again, for those people that every time I bring the word up, corruption or, greed or scripting or something like that, for those people that say, get over yourself, Cam, it's only a few bad referees, there's nothing dodgy going on here. Let me just remind you of this situation. So, just to recap, Everton are being charged with one breach of FFP regulations or FFP rules. If Everton are found guilty of that one breach of FFP, rule, of an FFP rule, the Premier League is recommending a 12-point deduction. Now, keep that in mind. Let me read this to you. Bear with me 2 seconds while I just get the maths up. Here we go. So this is an article from last year before last. Let me just read it to you. The 6 English clubs which secretly agreed to play in a European Super League will pay a combined 22 million. That is just over 3.5 million each. So effectively buttons. To draw the line under their ensuing row with the Premier League. The figure was announced in a joint statement by the Premier League and the Football Association on Wednesday. Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, Manchester City, Manchester United and Tottenham have also agreed to an additional £25 million fine and a potential 30-point deduction for any similar transgression in the future. So just to repeat myself, Everton are being investigated for potentially breaching one FFP rule. If Everton are found guilty, the Premier League demands, because that's the phrasing that has been used in certain articles over the last few days, over the last few hours, demands a 12-point deduction for Everton Football Club based on that. Now, the 6 clubs that single-handedly wanted to run away, wanted to completely destroy football, completely ruin the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of heritage and history that football has in this country, completely destroy the football pyramid, completely destroy everything we know about football, were welcomed back with open arms, had to pay £3.5 million, which, as we've just said, is nothing to them, and were basically told, don't do it again or you'll get a firmer punishment. So you can, and I'm not, by the way, saying that Everton Football Club, if they are found guilty, are victims in this, because they aren't. And ultimately, I'm not blaming anybody for the fact that we've gotten ourselves in this mess, other than the people that have been in charge of the football club, the owner, etc., etc. However, let me just get this straight. Breaking one financial rule could bring a 20-point deduction. Oh, sorry, is it a 12 or a 20-point deduction? I keep getting confused. A 12-point deduction, okay. However, if you single-handedly try and ruin football and try and run away with football and try and create a money-hungry Super League without the fans' interest at heart, just to make more money, and you turn your back completely on the Premier League and effectively say, we're not asked about you anymore, we're going to go and do this on our own, you're welcome back with open arms and you only have to pay a little bit of a fine. So, breaking one financial rule, 12-point deduction. Trying to ruin the entirety of football, you'll get a little fine and a slap on the wrist and you'll be welcome back. Don't sit there and tell me that corruption doesn't exist in this league and in football. Don't sit there and tell me that certain clubs don't get preferential treatment over other clubs when it comes to their mistakes. You know, we can sit there all we like and debate refereeing decisions and debate whether or not Craig Pawson is just incredibly dreadful at his job, or whether or not he's biased and corrupt and there's other things going on. But one thing you cannot debate is the Premier League blatantly punishing one situation which isn't really that serious. It is serious, and I'm not saying it's not serious, and Everton might have spent the hundreds of millions of pounds more than they should have. But you are punishing one rule break with such a hefty point deduction when the most catastrophic thing that's ever happened in English football was punished by a little bit of a fine and a slap on the wrist. I'll tell you why. Because the Premier League don't need Everton. Everton don't bring anything to the Premier League. They don't bring a particular amount of monetary value to the Premier League. They don't bring a huge amount of eyes to the Premier League. They're not particularly relevant in terms of the league table. But most of the time of my life, we've floated around mid-table and just been there. All right, the last couple of years, we've had a couple of relegation battles, but we're mostly just in and around the sort of purgatory areas of the league table. Whereas Manchester United, biggest club in the world, arguably. Manchester City, best team in the world, arguably. Liverpool, huge club, huge European history. Arsenal, huge club. Chelsea, massive club in the United States, and obviously, hugely successful recently. Spurs, I'm not really sure what Spurs were doing at the table, if I'm being honest with you, but they can't punish Spurs and not the others. So ask yourself the question, why are Everton getting punished? Or why did the Premier League recommend Everton get punished when they absolutely shit themselves after the European Super League debacle? The reason is because if Everton get a 12-point deduction and are relegated and, ultimately are pushed down to the Championship, the Premier League probably doesn't lose much money, probably doesn't lose much business. If it loses Man United, Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal, etc., it loses huge amounts of money. It loses huge amounts of business. So therefore, there is a clear and obvious, to quote a VAR statement, there is a clear and obvious need for the Premier League to keep certain clubs happy and certain clubs, comfortable. And that is a need that they're not willing to implement when other football clubs are in question. And that is the definition of corruption, because they are treating one club differently to another club based upon the monetary value that brings to the Premier League, which tells you that it ain't a fair playing field. It's not it's August the 10th, everybody can win the league, it's a fair go at it's a fair crack at the whip for anybody, any team can do it, where will we be at the end of the season? It ain't that at all. It is WWE without Vince McMahon and not being as blatant. I'd actually rather watch WWE, because people go, oh, it's fake, how can you watch that? It's scripted, it's fake. But so is the Premier League. At least, with the WWE, it's scripted and fake. So if something happens, you can go, bloody hell, that's not very realistic. You know what I mean? If the Premier League come out now and said, yeah, it's scripted, we script all our decisions, we script the games, etc., we'd have all sat there at the Merseyside derby and said, fucking hell, I know it's scripted, but at least make it realistic. That refereeing decision there isn't realistic at all. So, yeah, not only has this come at a shocking time for this article to be released and for us to be having to have this conversation, but the actual article in itself, and if it is true, and I have to say that because there is a chance that it's just a made-up story by journalists to try and sort of create fear. And as I've just said, the media in this country are poisonous. They are absolutely poisonous. They're like a disease that runs through the country, and anybody that is doing remotely well or anybody that's having a tough time, they just attach themselves to, and they make it worse for them. Maybe it is just a made-up story to try and, cause more havoc than what is already going on with the football club at the moment. But if it is to be true, then it answers a lot of questions for me. It answers a lot of questions because, ultimately, I don't think we've ever seen a financial fair play sort of situation like this go to court or be heard or whatever. However, it's interesting that Manchester City's 115 charges were announced about 5 years ago, whereas our charge was announced, 12 months ago, 14 months ago, and already ours is about to be heard and the verdict's about to be given, whereas Manchester City's has seemingly just disappeared. And ultimately, if we have breached a rule and we're being fined 12 points for it, and Manchester City have breached, and I'm not saying Manchester City have, but if Manchester City are found guilty of the same thing on 115 charges, then surely their points deduction is 12,000 points. 1,200 points. It won't be, because they need Manchester City. Because if they don't have Manchester City, then they don't have Erling Haaland, who's arguably the best footballer in the world. They don't have Pep Guardiola, who's the best manager in the world. They don't have Kevin De Bruyne, who's probably the best midfielder in the world. They don't have John Stones, who's probably the best defender in the world. So the treatment of other football clubs is different to ours. And it's not just Everton. It'd be the same if it was West Ham or Bournemouth or Brentford or whoever it might be. I would absolutely love to sit down with Richard Masters or anybody else at the Premier League and say to them, tell me now with a straight face and a lie detector on that you do not give certain clubs in this league preferential treatment in any sense, whether it be with refereeing decisions, whether it be with situations like this, whether it be with anything, that you do not give certain clubs preferential treatment, because they couldn't say no, because they'd be barefaced lying. They would be barefaced lying. So, yeah, as it stands, that seems to be where we are with it. We still haven't had the verdict, so we don't know whether Everton will be found guilty or Everton will be will be innocent. Everton still stick with the fact that they've not done anything wrong and that they are innocent and that there's no case to answer. But I'm sure we will. I'm sure we'll hear more about that over the course of the next week or so, and the next few days, because it's definitely a situation that is heating up at the moment, and the verdict is said to be coming to a conclusion sometime soon. So yeah, let's wait and see on this one. But if this is to be true and the Premier League has recommended this, then I've got serious questions about everything that happened following the Super League situation, the Super League debacle, because what's the point? What's the point? And I genuinely do mean that. I'm not just saying that to try and create attention. I'm not just saying that to try and get views. I'm not just saying that to try and dramatise the situation. But if Everton are found guilty of one FFP charge and given a 12-point deduction, and Liverpool, Man City, Man United, Arsenal all were allowed to get away with what they got away with in terms of the Super League, then what's the point? What's the actual point? We may as well just fuck it off and not bother watching anymore. Do you know what I mean? Because it's not a fair playing. Literally, if that happens, then send us to the Championship. Don't relegate us. Just put us in the Championship. And if we win it, don't put us back up. Because I hate this league. I really, really do. I hate it. I think it's absolutely covered in secrecy. It's covered in gross misconduct. It's covered in huge amounts of incapable people to do their jobs at the best, at the worst. Corruption. It's covered with it's covered in greed. It's covered in all sorts, and I'll be honest with you, and I'm not saying I want Everton to get relegated or I hope we get relegated, but if we had an option to go to the Championship without being relegated, I'd take your hand off now. And it's not even footballing reasons. It's so we don't have to deal with all of this bollocks and this nonsense, because I really do despise this league. Best league in the world, it's a fucking shambles. The Premier League is an absolute fucking shambles. It really, really is. It's terrible. It's a terrible league run by people that don't understand what they're doing, that clearly give preferential treatment to certain clubs because they benefit from it. So what's the point then? What's the point? What's the point? As I've just said, the wrestling is scripted, it's fixed. You know what wrestlers are going to be given big matches. You know what wrestlers are going to be given titles. Nobody's sitting there saying, why isn't this wrestler getting a main title chat or whatever, because well, they're not really massively over, or they're not really, they're not big with the crowd, so they're not going to get those opportunities. But you know that, so you don't particularly argue it. The Premier League are doing the same thing, but they're trying to hide behind it, and I just don't. Yeah, like I said, for me, I don't see the point. I don't see the point if we are to be given that point deduction. Wayne says, can I get you? But let me ask you this: if we operated and played like Brighton, would you be that annoyed? Well, no. And again, I am not blaming the Premier League for Everton being in this position. Everton are in this position because we have Well, I say in this position, ultimately, the verdict could be that Everton are innocent and there's no case to answer. And then we'll be sitting here congratulating the football club on the way in which they handled this situation. If Everton are to be guilty, then it's not the Premier League's fault or anybody else's fault. It's our fault for the mismanagement of the finances and spending too much money on players over the years and wages, etc., etc., etc. However, all I ask for, and it's the same at 3 o'clock on a Saturday, and this is why I was so frustrated about the derby. Liverpool beat us 2-0, penalty, counter-attack goal, no problem with it. All I ask for is that we are treated in the same way as that Liverpool are treated by the officials, and we weren't. And all I ask for in this situation is our case is treated in the same way as other cases have been treated over the years, and it's being treated as much worse. And that is where I have the problem. I don't have the problem with us if we're guilty, because that's our fault. I have the problem with the way in which it's being treated. Premier League cheats, we have to stand up, says Joey. I blame Michelle. He says Eugene Collins says the points deduction wouldn't take place this season because Everton will have the right to appeal, and who knows how long that will take, so it'll be worse next season. Whether it takes place this season, next season, or the season after, if Everton are given a 12-point deduction for this, if I was Everton, I'd say, do you know what? Don't even fucking bother, lads. Don't worry about it. We're just going to go make our own league and go and play over here because you're using absolute knobheads. The Blues says apparently so. Mr. Blue Skies, he says, I thought the one allegation was tax on the stadium. The Blues also makes a really, really good point, saying, what's worse is our losses, of course, the breach were caused by things that were out of our control. How could we predict the war in Ukraine, which lost the sports sponsorships, and then losing Sigurdsson for 45 million? None of that was our fault. Absolutely. None of that. Maybe that is being taken into consideration. It's certainly not being taken into consideration by the Premier League because they seem desperate to to punish us and desperate to ultimately give us a points deduction. But maybe it will be taken into consideration by the independent committee. If you are enjoying, by the way, please hit that like button. It does only take a second. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. That would mean a great deal to me as well. Also, don't forget to head over to Fan Hub. The link is in the description down below. If you use the code THE let me get it on the screen now so you can see it. THE dash UBP. You'll be able to sign up with our code. Get on there. Go and follow us. It is at TheMightyBlues. We're trying to create a community over there. As you can see, you can add your matches that you've been to this season. You can check in at stadiums as well. If you check in away grounds, it'll calculate how far you've travelled based upon where your home location is. So if I went to the Emirates, it would say something like 400 odd miles because I travelled to London from here. You can also do the predictions, predict your 5 scores for today. I believe these are all games today, and I've actually had a bet on these games, but I can't remember what bet I've had, so I'm going to predict them right here, right now. Ipswich Town, Bristol City. I'll be honest, I ain't got a clue about their form. I ain't got a clue. I don't know if anybody in the live comments has got a clue. If you have, let me know. This isn't betting, by the way. I'm saying I've put a separate bet on. This isn't betting. This is just a prediction game, which you earn points from if you get the scores correct. Plymouth, Sheffield United. Wednesday, I'm going Plymouth because Sheffield Wednesday are terrible. Preston, Southampton, I'm going Preston. I'm going Leeds in that one. And I'll go Atletico in that one. I'll go with Bristol. That's the home team. So I'll save my predictions there. Get over, as I said, to the Fan Hub app. As you can see, we can do our predicted starting 11 for the West Ham United game, but that will be coming tomorrow in the game preview, so look out for that one. Yeah, as I said, in terms of the Premier League stuff, yeah, well, let's wait and see. I said this last week. I think we spoke about this last week because there was a bit of news and information about the breaches, and I said let's just wait and see what happens, and we'll go from there. And we're very much still in the same position. Although we've had this article, we still haven't had any form of indication from the independent committee that this is what will happen. So yeah, let's wait and see. If you are enjoying, by the way, please hit the like button. It does only take a second. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe. A lot of people saying Ipswich are doing well. Ipswich are second. I think I've just put Bristol to win, so shit. Bill Kenwright, as I've just said, has had a lot of messages over the last 24 hours after the terrible news of his passing yesterday. Seamus Coleman has said, Bill Kenwright was more than a chairman to me. He was a friend. The way he treated me and my family when I first came to the club from Ireland was incredible. It meant the world to us and was a massive part of me settling in and having a career with Everton. And I know that I am far from being the only player to be able to say that. The chairman never interfered and very rarely visited the dressing room, but we all know that he was there if we needed him. And when he did speak to us as a group, we listened because he knew our club as well as anyone. He was inspirational, he was so kind, he loved Everton, and his presence will be sorely missed. My thoughts and those of my family are with Jenny and the rest of the family at this very, very sad time. Really heartfelt message from Seamus there. Farhad Mashiri has posted quite a long message regarding Bill Kenwright. He says, I'm deeply saddened by the news of the passing of my great friend Bill. Bill was a force of nature and he certainly changed my life nearly 10 years ago when he first spoke to me about getting involved with the club he adored. He told me about this incredible club, a club that not only has history and heritage but was also a beating heart of our community, and for that I will always be grateful. He was very persuasive and I invested both into that football club and also this becoming part of it, and joining a new family. There can be no mistaking that Bill loved Everton Football Club. He spoke with an infectious enthusiasm about every aspect of Everton, from the legends of yesteryear to his unconditional support for everybody that wears the blue shirt and represents the club. He admired the hard work, dedication and effort of every member of staff across the club and Everton in the community, but most of all, he recognised and empathised with the passion, loyalty and support all the Everton teams have had from Evertonians, be that at home, away or abroad. It's a much longer message. I'm not going to read all of it because I'm sure you've all seen it. There's been tributes from Tim Cahill, as I said before, tributes from Carlo Ancelotti on Instagram. Leon Osman has posted saying, thank you for all you did for me, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for all you did for our club. You loved everything about Everton. You'll be forever remembered alongside the heroes of our club. Rest in peace. Carlo said, Evertonian to the core, always a good friend. You will be missed. Rest in peace, Bill. Sean Dyche and Seamus Coleman laid a wreath outside of Goodison Park this morning in tribute to the late chairman. Mikel Arteta paid his respects in his press conference yesterday after Arsenal's win in the Champions League. Kevin Morales has posted, Michael Keane has posted, Ashley Williams. As I said, pretty much every player that has some form of social media account has posted a tribute over the last sort of 24 hours or so, which shows you just how impactful Bill Kenwright was to the people who were employed at this football club, and you know it really does put things into perspective, because I never met Bill Kenwright, and listen, I'll be brutally honest, I had some negative things to say about Bill Kenwright and the way in which he was running this football club. None of that really matters now, of course, but I did. I'm not going to hide away from it. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say I was always complimentary of Bill, because I wasn't. I did have times when I was frustrated. I did have times when I was angry. I did have times when I maybe said stuff that I regret, or I was a little bit harsh. However, I never met him, so none of it was coming from a personal point of view. None of it was coming from a sort of I know you and I don't like you point of view. It was purely a footballing basis, and from what I was seeing on the pitch transferred into my emotions. Whereas I think what has become quite evident over the last 24 hours is anybody that did meet Bill Kenwright, anybody that did spend time with him, anybody that did work with him or work for him or work alongside him, clearly heavily respects the man and clearly heavily appreciated what he did for them individually, and I think that is something to be very, very well respected. And obviously, as I've said before, and I'll say it again, sending all our thoughts and prayers to Jenny and Bill's family during this sad time. The Blues says, spot on, Cam, but as you say, that's judging Bill the chairman, not the human being. Absolutely. And then a final bit of news I want to talk about before we move on is, according to The Athletic, and Amadou Onana is on Newcastle United's shortlist of possible options to replace Sandro Tonali. Apparently they're looking at bringing Onana in January, because obviously Tonali is facing quite a lengthy spell out due to a gambling ban. I can't see Everton selling Onana in January, to be honest. The summer, maybe, but definitely not January. It all depends, doesn't it? It depends on the situation that we're in, the position that we're in, the money that they're offering. I'm sure they'll have a number of players on their shortlist to replace Tonali. He was such an important player to them, so I'm sure there'll be a number of targets there, and Amadou Onana probably is just another name, and that's not surprising considering his ability and his future and his potential and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, I wouldn't pay too much attention to this one yet, but it's interesting that it's in the news. So there you go. We're going to leave it there. If you have enjoyed this one, please do leave a like. It would mean a huge amount to me. We will be back tomorrow with the game preview to Everton's Premier League fixture against West Ham United. We'll also be doing our Fan Hub predicted starting 11 in that video, so don't forget to join us for that one. But yeah, until then, massive thank you to everybody. Really do appreciate it. If you're watching the YouTube video, leave your comments down below. If you're watching live, then please do give the video a thumbs up. And yeah, subscribe to the channel if you are new. But anyway, big thank you all for watching. Really do appreciate it. Up the toffees, and we'll see you after.